Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Carson Scott. Coming up for you, fuelling the future as competition for coal seam gas heats up. Just how's the law staying in step? Plus, could climate change create a new class of refugees? That's later on in the show, but first let's have an update for you on the stories making waves in legal circles this week. Chris Merritt, legal editor of The Australian, joining me now. Chris, great to talk with you as always. The export trade now in legal services, a la the Stern Who case, just put it into context. What is at stake? Because this is throwing up some interesting issues.
Big money, that's what's at stake. Around about the time when Stern Who got himself into trouble, the federal government launched a new export strategy for legal exports, and I wouldn't quite say it's in tatters as far as China's concerned, but it's not looking very good. It's based on getting very close to the Chinese Ministry of Justice, and as the Stern Who case demonstrates, that's a little problematic right now.
Tell me about the interplay between the way we bring out some of their legal representatives in China to expose them to quote-unquote the rule of law, how that might be on the skids, care of what's going on with Stern.
There's a strong interplay of forces here. For a number of years now, a number of courts, the Federal Court of Australia, the Supreme Court of New South Wales, have been playing host to large numbers, significant numbers of Chinese lawyers and judges. We've been showing them how our legal system operates, and the view of some of the judges, the Australian judges here, has been that this could eventually have a rub-off effect, that the impact of the rule of law could permeate into China that way. But Stern Who demonstrates that there's problems, and there's other problems. As just this week, 53 Chinese lawyers lost their practising certificates for taking up cases very similar to the Stern Who matter. There's a real struggle going on here about the direction of the Chinese legal profession.
Yeah, that one is not going to change overnight, but it's a worrying sign, as you say, if licences are revoked just seemingly that arbitrarily. Can we move on? Can we talk about whistleblowing and Alan Kessing in particular? There is an appeal set to be heard by the High Court. Those proceedings are kicking off next week. Run me through what's at stake there.
This is a case that is close to the heart of every journalist. It's about whistleblowing, but what is really at stake here is federal government policy. If Alan Kessing wins in the High Court, the federal government will have to bin its proposal on reforming whistleblower protection laws. What Alan Kessing wants to do is kill off, as unconstitutional, the criminal sanctions for all unauthorised leaks from the federal public service. The Labor government, which came to office promising a new era of openness, is actually considering a whistleblower reform plan that maintains those criminal sanctions. So if Kessing wins, the federal government loses.
Got a hunch as to which way it's likely to go?
Well, we'll get an idea on Friday, but my tip would be that if the High Court agrees to hear this, and what we're talking about is a special leave application, you've got to go to court and say, please hear this case. And if the High Court agrees to hear it, I'd say that's a pretty strong indication that they might have something to say about the wide-ranging impact of these criminal sanctions. They hit not just trivial leaks, but real serious public interest disclosures of the sort that Alan Kessing made.
All right, well, I'd like us to stay on that one and monitor it as, of course, it does develop. Meanwhile, talk about public interest. The federal court, not so much the federal court as well, has come out with this $360,000 fine for radio station 2UE. This is all to do with Mr. John Laws. What really was playing out there? How did he overstep the mark?
Yes, is the short answer. But the real significance of this case is for all other radio broadcasters. This is a real warning. This penalty, $360,000, is almost 3 times as much as the regulator wanted. The court just took a very stern view of this and fell on not John Laws because he's retired, but Fairfax Media, which inherited 2UE after Laws retired, and hit them with this massive fine. it's a very strong indication about the standard of conduct that the federal court expects from radio broadcasters. It's a real warning.
So the moral of that story, in essence, is what? If you have a conflict of interest, you disclose that.
If you're a radio broadcaster and you're sponsored by somebody and you do not make it very clear that this is one of your sponsors, it can cost you $10,000 a go, which is what poor old Fairfax inherited when it bought 2UE.
Are they going to appeal that one? Are they going to appeal it?
That's what everyone's watching. I think that'll be what John Laws has urged them to do, even though he's out of the picture and his money's not at stake. But it'd be very interesting to see if Fairfax does push it a little bit further.
Well, at 360,000 there is a lot at stake. We appreciate this, Chris. As always, many thanks for bringing us across those stories.
Quite okay.
All right, we'll talk to you next week. Let's move on, and keeping a lid on litigation costs. Of course, one of the trickier aspects of going to court, or in the words of former High Court Chief Justice at least, Murray Gleeson, litigation is a prime example of work that expands to fill the available time. The question being just how can clients reduce their legal bills? The answer could be by hiring a management consultant. Ally Group provides advisory services to firms to help minimise their litigation spend. It says it does this by making lawyers more accountable. Well, to hear more about it, here's the CEO of Ally Group, Joanne Rees, with me in the studio. It almost seems counterintuitive, Joanne, that bringing in someone in the middle of those negotiations can save you money because you've got to take your cut.
Well, I'd like to use an analogy of a property development. If you want to build a large building, you don't give the architects and the builders a blank cheque and say, tell me at the end of the day what this is going to cost. And unfortunately, litigation is becoming more and more complex, and effectively the law firms are now writing their own scope of works and billing clients monthly, and clients have no control over the work that's being done and how much it's actually costing them. And so by bringing in an independent project manager, you can ensure that the scope of works is strategic and is managed, that there isn't unnecessary fat in the process. So in fact we are finding that clients can save up to 5 times our project management costs in their litigation fees.
That was going to be my question. Are you going in there with yourself a flat fee and telling these clients, look, this is our set cost for the duration of this case, potentially, we will charge X amount and no more?
We can sometimes do that. For a client such as government, it's obviously not appropriate to do that, so we might then charge on an hourly or daily rate. But what we are doing is, at the earliest possible time, dealing directly with senior counsel who will ultimately run the case and ascertaining what are the 1 or 2 principal arguments and sort of 10 major documents that are going to be important in the case, setting the parameters, and then going to the law firms and saying, well, how will you manage this case in this client's interest? Are you prepared to manage it within these parameters? Clients don't always want the firms to risk manage to the extent of chasing every rabbit down every rabbit hole.
That's fine. That's okay. That's fine if you've got senior counsel employed on a case of that magnitude. But for cases that are perhaps a second tier but still taken on by the big firms, who do you go to make that analysis to tell you that we only need the 10 documents?
Well, might go to a more junior counsel in that instance. What we would do would be prepare a chronology of the principal issues and the major documents. We wouldn't do a complicated brief. We would stick them in a box or a folder and have a conference and sit around and talk and say, well, what is this case really about? What sort of cost-effective team do we need? And not leave it up to the law firm to decide how many people they need, but work cooperatively with them to say, well, how in this client's interest can we put a team together? I mean, for example, there are many junior counsel who are senior associates in law firms who will charge $200 an hour at the bar, whereas the law firms would charge them out at $600 an hour. So we can ensure that we get just the best mix to meet the client's needs.
You're talking not necessarily either about reducing the hourly rate here.
No, I don't think at all it's about hourly rates. It's about appropriate team structures, and it's about setting parameters as to what matters are really about and not letting them expand beyond those parameters.
You've said in the past that the big firms have got away with blue murder, quote unquote. How does that help you when you've made those sorts of pronouncements, when you're going in and seeking to sort of work collaboratively here? What's been the attitude response?
Well, it's interesting, actually. There are a number of mid-tier and top-tier firms that are very happy to work collaboratively with us, and I think that there are a number of reasons. One is there's a self-interest on their part. I mean, I think they realise that if litigation costs continue the way they are, there will be other models that will set up where the law firms won't be included, and that is starting to happen. You've got different mediation processes, and with firms like Ally Group who can step in and help clients, law firms could ultimately not be relevant. So I think they realise that and they want to work alongside us.
As far as your team, the expertise there, how can you be across the potential welter of cases that might come to your door? How are you going to handle case manage all of this?
We have our people are former partners or senior associates of major firms. They're highly experienced. They want to work flexibly. They no longer want to work in that large firm structure, and they're very happy to come in and sit on top and give the strategic input. We don't second guess the specialised legal knowledge we're seeking from the firm, but we just ensure that there is a strategy that's being followed, and we are the honest broker and interpreter to the clients.
You're comfortable, briefly, finally, that there's an accurate understanding of what is involved? I know that might sound counterintuitive, but if partners are delegating work and really taking a hands-off approach until the end game, as it were, is there really an understanding at top level of quite what goes into preparing for trial?
Oh, yes, we're not finding any difficulties there. The partners are still very much in control of what is happening.
Joanne, we must leave it there. Do wish you well. Thanks for providing that insight into Ally Group.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Joanne Rees there. Let's take a short break. Ahead for you, the human cost on climate change, time to legislate, or a whole lot of hot air. That's next.